Shout out to Black Diaspora Voice for posting this on their Twitter account. Now, this is very interesting, what you see right here on your screen. Dakotas lead U.S. in virus growth as both reject mask rules. And when they say Dakotas, they're talking about both the North and the South. It's not just one of them, it's both of them. Now, it's amazing how fast now that they lead in the growth of the virus. And, such a short amount of time. Now, I dare them to try to bring black people into this because North and South Dakota is predominantly white. I don't know if there is one black person that exists in that area. I don't even know a black person who is from another state that I've ever come across that has told me they're from the Dakotas. Because when I think of the Dakotas, I'm thinking like barren land, kind of like what you see in this picture right here on your screen. But I said a couple months ago that when it hits these rural areas, the places that were at the time untapped, which was at the time during the infancy stage of this virus, that by the time it gets there, it's going to hit them hard because a lot of those rural areas do not have a lot of the medical attention like a metropolitan area like your LAs and your New Yorks and your DCs, Atlantas, places like that, hell, even places in Texas. But those small rural towns that has like a small population are going to be hit hard. And they're actually hindering themselves because they reject the mask policies that are put into place. So I'm going to go ahead and read this article that's coming from NBC Connecticut that's going to go into more detail about this. The virus infections in the Dakotas are growing faster than anywhere else in the nation, fueling impassioned debates over masks and personal freedom after months in which the two states avoided the worst of the pandemic. See, that's the thing. It was the thinking of, it hasn't touched us, so it won't touch us, so we have nothing to worry about. Boy, were they extremely wrong. And I called that a few months ago. And, you would think they would take precaution because the minute that it touches one rural area, the rest of them need to take cover. But see, they probably thought, it didn't hit our area, so we're not going to be affected. But they are now. The argument over masks raged this week in Brookings, South Dakota, as the city council considered requiring face coverings in businesses. The city was forced to move its meeting to a local arena to accommodate intense interest, with many citizens speaking against it before the mask requirement ultimately passed. Amid the brute force of the pandemic, health experts warn that the infections must be contained before care systems are overwhelmed. North Dakota and South Dakota lead the country in new cases per capita over the last 2 weeks. Now, look at how fast that is in the last 2 weeks. So you're talking about within the last 14 days, these two states have eclipsed all the other states in the establishment for growth with this virus just that fast. That shows you right there, like I told you, that rural areas, like really small areas of pockets of people, will get infected very fast. Because like I said, they're small areas. They have a low population. They don't have a lot of medical attention. And because they thought because, it didn't hit us initially like it did all these other places where it had a lot of people, it's not going to touch us. I'm trying to think or figure out where in that brain of theirs, because I'm going to assume a brain is there, just may not be working. Did they think that this virus would not touch them? It's called a pandemic for a reason, which means there's no place on this planet that it really has not touched. Even in places where it may not have had a major impact, it's touched it, like Africa, for instance. And y'all know I just recently did a video about that. It may have not touched Africa or hit Africa as hard as other places, but it did touch there. So no place was not touched. And because we're in the U.S., which has the highest numbers of cases, both deaths and cases, non-deaths, I don't know why they think that they weren't going to be touched. I mean, do they think North and South Dakota are off the grid? Last I checked, they were part of the 50 states in this establishment. It says ranking first and second, respectively, according to Johns Hopkins University researchers. South Dakota has also posted some of the country's highest positivity rates for the virus test in the last week, over 17%, an indication that there are more infections than tests are catching. Infections have been spurred by schools and universities reopening and mass gatherings like the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally, which drew hundreds of thousands of people from across the country. And I can look by this picture and tell that this is where from that rally, just by the way that they're dressed. It is not a surprise that South Dakota has one of the highest virus reproduction rates in the country. Brookings City Council member Nick Wendell said as he commented on the many people who forgo masks in public. The Republican governors of both states have eschewed mask requirements, tapping into a spirit of independence honed from enduring the winters and storms of the Great Plains. The Dakotas were not always a hot spot. For months, the states appeared to avoid the worst of the pandemic, watching from afar as it raced through large cities. But spiking infection rates have fanned out across the nation, from the East Coast to the Sun Belt and now to the Midwest, where states like Iowa and Kansas are also dealing with surges. So see, that's what it is. Because the virus came from the outside in, it hits those edges, all those side areas, like your coastal areas, like the East Coast, the West Coast. And then what happens is once it goes from there, it works its way in. So why did they think that they weren't going to get touched? Because they are in the middle. See, the virus has to hit everywhere, and now it's hitting there. That's why you're starting to see numbers start to gradually subside on where it came in, and now they're rising here. But see, they didn't take the precautions. But now knowing this, they need to put something in place where nobody can leave or travel that far out of that state, out of both of those states, for at least a good month. Let them have their own little personal quarantine. Now knowing this, because they're going to try to travel. When the case count stayed low during the spring and early summer, people grew weary of constantly taking precautions, said Dr. Benjamin Aker, president of the South Dakota State Medical Association. People have a tendency to become complacent. Then they start to relax the things that they were doing properly, and that's when the increase in cases starts to go up. Health officials point out that the virus case increases have been among younger groups that are now hospitalized at high rates, but infections have not been contained to college campuses. College students work in places where the vulnerable live, such as nursing homes, said Dr. Joel Waltz, the Grand Forks, North Dakota City and County Health Officer. Some of them are nursing students who are doing rotations where they're going to see people who are really at risk. I worry about that. Over 1,000 students at the state's 4 largest universities, the University of North Dakota, North Dakota State University, South Dakota State University, and University of South Dakota, left campus to quarantine after being exposed to the virus, according to data released by the schools. The Sturgis rally also spread infections across the region, with health officials in 12 states reporting to over 300 cases among people who attended the event. But requiring masks has been controversial, and Brookings' opponents said they believe the virus threat was not as serious as portrayed and that a mandate was a violation of civil liberties. And there it is right there. Of course, they didn't think it was a threat because it wasn't touching them. But they know now. And now it's too late. It's on them. There are a lot of things we have in life that we have to deal with that cause death, business owner Teresa Holloman told the council. We live in America and we have certain inalienable rights. Though Brookings passed its ban, another hotspot, North Dakota's Morton County, just west of the capital city of Bismarck, soundly rejected a mask requirement after citizens spoke against it. Brookings may be the lone municipality with such an order in the Dakotas outside of the Native American reservations, which have generally been more vigilant in adopting the virus precautions. Native Americans have disproportionately died from the virus, accounting for 24% of deaths statewide. North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum and South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem have resisted mask requirements. Burgum promotes personal choice but tried to encourage masks with a social media campaign. Noam has discouraged mask requirements, saying she doubts a broad consensus in the medical community that they help prevent infections. At a press briefing, Burgum displayed a slide that showed active cases in neighboring Minnesota rising to record levels since implementing a mask mandate July 25th. Let's go with that for a second. Let's just hypothetically say that the masks don't prevent the spread of the infection. It's a pandemic. It's going to touch you regardless. So you should be prepared for when it happens. But they aren't. So it doesn't really matter. It was going to touch you anyway. In the end, it's about individual decisions, not what the government does, he said. Noam, who has yet to appear at a public event with a mask, carved out a reputation as a staunch conservative when she defied calls early in the pandemic for lockdown orders. And there you go. Let me read that again. They said, Noam, who has yet to appear at a public event with a mask, carved out a reputation as a staunch conservative. Key word there, staunch. When she defied calls early in the pandemic, which was back like in March, for lockdown orders. See, there it is. There's the arrogance right there. See, they weren't prepared, and they refused to be prepared. So that means they were going off doing whatever they want while everybody else was being affected, but now it's on them now. Now they don't know what to do. But both governors face increasing pressure to step up their approach. Dr. Anthony Fauci, infectious disease chief at the National Institute of Health, told MSNBC that the state's virus levels were disturbing, especially as fall weather arrives and Americans begin spending more time indoors. You don't want to start off already with a baseline that's so high. Neither governor appears ready to yield any ground. We will not be changing that approach, Noam spokesman Ian Fury said Thursday, citing a low hospitalization rate and the fact that only 3% of the intensive care beds are occupied by the virus patients. Doctors in both states warn that their healthcare systems remain vulnerable. Small hospitals in rural areas depend on just a handful of large hospitals to handle large inflows of patients or complex procedures, said Dr. Misty Anderson, president of the North Dakota Medical Association. And that goes back to what I was saying, that they're not prepared in multiple ways. One of them because they don't have the enough hands on deck to deal with an inflow or an influx of people that will be coming in and out of that hospital. Because a lot of times, in those small rural towns, they only have 1 or 2 hospitals or 1 or 2 doctors within probably a 5-mile radius of each other. Because the towns are so tiny. Aker, the president of the South Dakota Physicians Group, said medical practices have seen patients delaying routine care during the pandemic, meaning that the doctors could soon see an uptick in patients needing more serious attention. Now we are adding a surge in virus cases potentially, he said. They are worried about being overwhelmed. I bet they are. Ask me how I feel about it. It's not my fault that they weren't prepared for what was about to come. But see, it's that arrogance again. And, and it's amazing. It's the female conservative that is the one that wasn't even trying to at least take precaution. At least the male one, he gave them an option. Her, on the other hand, she's like, nope, this is how we're going to do it. And even now knowing this, they're still acting very headstrong with their approach. And it's about to gobble them up. But you know what? Like I said, there isn't a place where this woo-woo has not touched yet. Not to my knowledge, anyway. And they are no different. And they're about to find out just how intense this is. But in a way, after what I just read, they're finding out right now. And it ain't going to be pretty for them. And also, it'll be getting cold soon. I don't know what the climate is like in the fall, in the winter months, in the Dakotas, because I've never been there. Definitely don't plan on going there for what. So they better be prepared for that as well.